5.6 million DNS queries in the past 30 days, of which 2.3 million are blocked in my home network alone? What? That sounds like a good tool. In this video we are going to set up Adguard and Unbound as a network-wide solution which allows you to make sure that nobody is going to visit websites you don't want them to see, which prevents companies from tracking you, and which significantly lowers the amount of advertisements you are going to see on any device logged into your network. Let's get started. Okay, first thing to do is to actually create a virtual machine. You can do that with whatever tool you want to do it with. I use my Proxmox installation. So I create a new virtual machine, I give it an ID and I give it a name. I call it Adguard-VM. I also check the advanced box so I can do some more advanced stuff here, but that is not necessary per se. So what we do now is we select the ISO image of the operating system we want to install. I go with Debian. You can do whatever you want to do. This is definitely not the time where we would have those distribution wars going on. Next step is to define the system. We check QEMU agent so the IP address gets reported later on. Now we head over to the disk section. Here I go with a local disk of 32 gigabytes. Could be less, but 32 could be good as well. Then we head over to the CPU section. I go with one socket and 2 cores. That's plenty enough. And within the memory section, I give it a start amount of memory of 1 gigabyte and a maximum amount of memory of 2 gigabytes. I won't make any changes in the network section, and I check Start After Created on the confirmation screen. Then I click Finish, and now the machine is going to be created. That might take a few seconds, and then the machine actually starts. So I click on the machine, I click on console, and then I enter the installer. I choose graphical install. You can definitely do a traditional install as well, but you know, nice graphics is always nice. And then the installation process actually starts. First thing to do is to select the language. English is a great language, so we go with that one. Next thing to do is select the location. I'm not located in the United States or somewhere else on this screen, so I choose Other and then head over to Europe and to Germany. If you are in the United States, obviously stick with that selection. Locale, United States, EN, US is perfectly fine with me, but my keyboard then again is a German one, so I select that one as well. Then I hit continue, and now the installation starts. Basic components are loaded, and then we are again asked to do some customizing. Okay, what we have to provide the system with now is the host name, and I go with Adguard-VM. Hit continue. The domain name can be whatever fits your needs. I go with home, and now I decide for the root password. That password should be safe and secure, so choose wisely. Then I'm going to create a dedicated user. I called it user OpenTech. Obviously, that user will have a username for login, and I stay with OpenTech. And now I have to give this user a password as well. Here the same thing applies as with the root password. You should choose a secure password. We hit continue. And now we come to the disk management section. In the partition disks screen, I go with guided use entire disk. I select my only attached disk. And I also go with the option to keep all files in one partition. I then hit continue on the next screen and I say yes to writing the changes to the disks. So I hit continue and now the base system is going to be installed. After the installation has finished, I am asked whether I want to install additional software from additional media. I don't want to, so I just hit continue. And now we configure the package manager. So you typically choose a location close to you. So I go with Germany and I select one of the mirrors provided. I don't have any proxy here. And now APT is going to be configured. Then we are asked whether we want to contribute to the popularity contest. No, we don't want to. Next thing is to decide whether we actually want to have a desktop environment being set up or not. And no, we don't want to have any desktop environment on a server, but we check the SSH server box since we want to SSH into the machine later on. We then hit continue and now the installation process continues. Last thing to do is to install the bootloader, and yes, we want to install the bootloader on our primary device, so we select that one and then hit continue. Perfect. The installation is now finished, so we can hit continue to reboot the machine. And as you can see, everything is working fine and we could now log into the machine. But we won't do that from this console. Instead, we will switch over to an SSH client. In case you are wondering how to SSH into your machine, since you don't know about the IP address, that's quite simple. If the QEMU agent tools are installed, you can find the IP address on the summary page of your virtual machine. Just copy it and use it. And if they are not installed already, you need to log into the machine and you need to install the QEMU guest agent package. In my case, it was obviously already installed, but depending on your distribution, it could be necessary to install it later on. Okay, here from the terminal, you can log into the machine using SSH. We use the recently created user account, and now first thing to do is to switch into super user mode. And now we can install sudo. And once sudo has been installed, we can open the vsudo tool to check that not only the root user has permissions required, but also the sudo group. Perfect, that looks nice. And now we assign the sudo group to our main user. We do that by using usermod -ag sudo and then the name of the user. Perfect. Now we can log out of the SSH session and relog into it. And now we can install the Unbound reverse DNS server. We do that by entering sudo apt install unbound -y, and then the Unbound server is getting installed. Perfect. Now the next thing we need to do is to actually configure the Unbound server as a reverse DNS server. A reverse DNS server is a server that you query from your network, and as long as that server has the information which machine to actually call on the internet for returning a website, it will return you that information directly. If it does not have that information, it will query so-called upstream service. Most importantly here is the aspect of being pretty sparse on the data that you expose. The information about the addresses you want to visit is only one time submitted to the outside world until the point of time is reached where your reverse DNS server stops caching that specific information. So let's move over and configure Unbound. So what we need to do is we need to edit the Unbound config file. It is located, we should use sudo for that, it is located in etc/unbound/unbound.confd, and it is called config.conf. That file typically does not exist initially, so we create it. Okay, I now just copy it in here and we go from top to bottom to explain what we have here. First of all, and very importantly, since Unbound is supposed to work with Adguard only and we will install Adguard on the same machine, we make Unbound only listen to requests from this local machine. We define the port as 5335. We don't do IPv6. If you do IPv6, you can obviously say yes to that. We do IPv4 and UDP. We set the number of threads to be used to 4. We hide our DNS server information. Then we have a lot of DNS fraud and DNSSEC specific entries, which we all set to yes. Then we define an unwanted reply threshold, and we define the minimum time to live for cache entries to be 300 seconds, meaning 5 minutes. Maximum cache time to live is 14,400 seconds, and now I would be forced to do maths, but to me that looks a lot like half of a day or a day. I'll use the calculator later on. Okay, then number of optimizations, which we leave as we have defined them. We define the memory size of the cache. We then also increase the buffer size so we do not lose anything during traffic spikes, and we define those private addresses to be private addresses. So whenever we query things with those address spaces, Unbound will never ever use that information towards the outside world. So that information is never exposed outside your local network. Perfect. We are fine with that. We save it. Now, next thing to do before we can consider Unbound to be completely installed, we need to restart the Unbound service. We do that with the systemctl tool, and the command is restart Unbound. And now Unbound is completely configured and already working here. Next thing to do, we need to install Adguard. There are different ways to install Adguard on a machine. You can install it via a script, you can install it via Docker, or you can install it using the Snap Store. We go with the script install here, and all we have to do is to first of all install curl, and then we can use it to fetch the current version of the Adguard install script and execute it. So the good thing is we don't need to do anything special here. Adguard is already installed. Now we can come to the Adguard configuration. Let's switch over to our browser and open the Adguard homepage. Where you can reach the Adguard homepage, you ask? Well, it's the IP address of your virtual machine, followed by :3000. So we click on Get Started. We will definitely listen on all web interfaces, that is fine. Adguard should expose a DNS server on port 53, perfectly fine. Adguard needs to have a static IP address, but that typically is to be configured on the level of your DHCP server or on your wireless router, so you can do that there. You click Next, and now you need to define a username and a strong password. So perfectly, that looks all good and nice. And now, as Adguard has been installed, we can open the dashboard, and we do that by logging into the Adguard machine. And this time we do that by just entering the IP address, since we defined that Adguard should listen to port 80, and then we enter the username and the password. We click on Sign In, and Adguard still looks a bit empty, but we will change that. So we now click on Settings, and first of all we head over to the DNS settings, and here is where the magic happens. Okay, what we need to do now is we need to add our local Unbound DNS server, and that one is listening to 127.0.0.1 on port 5335 as we just defined. Then we would take away that information with the upstream server. And if you, for example, run a Fritzbox or some other Wi-Fi enabled DSL modem and router providing you with own DNS server functionality, you might want to add an entry there and a reverse entry there so that names are correctly resolved. We then select parallel requests to speed up the resolving. Just click on Apply. So everything now has been saved properly, and now your Adguard is already able to work. But we also need to make sure that Adguard is behaving the way we want it to be. So I recommend to check the Use Adguard Parental Control Web Service, since that one would allow you to block out, parental content. And if you wanted to, you could also enforce safe search. I typically leave that unchecked. Apart from that, you could also check the Use Adguard Browsing Security Web Service. What I typically do then is to enable statistics and to set that to 30 days, because it gives a bit better of an insight of how things work on your network. Hit Save, and everything should be set up here. Now we will head over to the Filters section, where the actual magic is happening. So what we have here is already 2 entries in this block list, and you should definitely enable the away default block list as well, even if that one is currently just showing 0 entries. What you then would do is basically add additional block lists as you like it. I recommend clicking on choose from the list and then use then products lists, the game console add block lists, the OISD block list basic, perf lists, and Dandelion Sprouts Smart TV block list. I'm a German, what do you expect me to do here? And definitely Peter Lowe's list. For security, I would also check all of the entries there. And for regional list, check if you find an entry here that would match your region. If not, you can anyhow add an entry to your liking later on. Hit save, and then you have a lot of filters already defined. And then we can basically go and add additional block lists as custom lists. Each one of those lists has a name and an address. For example, we use the Adguard base list, which is part of what the Adguard browser blocker understands. Then I copy its URL. I hit save, and now I also have added that one. I repeat that with each and every additional list I want to add. I recommend doing a short search there, or to head over to the Adguard website and look for their lists. They disclose that. And you can simply add those ones in here as well. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to be back once I've done that. Okay, I'm done now. So now I hit check for updates. By the way, Adguard does that typically automatically for us. And now our Adguard is completely up and running. Before we now can actually head over to our router, let's have one last look at settings, DHCP settings, since we need to find out about our IP addresses, and that is one of the simplest ways of doing that. So we need to have both the IPv4 as well as the IPv6 addresses at our disposal, and we need to note them down, since those will be the addresses which we will need to enter into our DHCP server's interface. Okay, my DHCP server is a Fritzbox. I need to head over to, and please apologize for the German interface, to Home Network here, and then need to open the IPv4 settings and enter the information there, hit OK, and then do the same with the IPv6 settings. So I need to enter the address for the DNS server here as well. Then one last thing to do is to head over into the internet section, access data DNS server, and add the DNS server there as well. And once you did that, and once your system was running for a while, you might see a picture similar like that, like roughly 5.8 million queries within the past 30 days, with 2.4 million queries being blocked. That is a whopping amount of 41.58% of all queries having been blocked. I was lucky. I did not encounter any malware or phishing approaches. Nice one. But somebody tried to surf some adult websites in my network. I need to have a word with that specific person. When you have a look at that dashboard, you can also see and learn a lot of things here. For example, who is actually tracking you the most? And to me it was quite interesting to find out that it is not Google. In our case, here at home, it is Microsoft. Microsoft, shame on you. But on the other hand, good news is, you see it is blocked and they can't track you. Okay, and how does that then look in real life, you ask? Well, I opened, for example, CNN, and as you can see, pretty much no advertisement, at least no intrusive one, which is pretty great. Or have a look at MSN, which is famous for throwing a lot of adverts at you. A clean website, and you can pretty much read a lot of information without getting disturbed or tracked. So that is definitely worth the effort. And the good thing is, with the combination of Adguard and Unbound, you set it up once and then it just works. You don't need to change any configuration on any of the devices within your network. It simply works. Could be that from time to time you need to adjust the filters. That is easily be done by opening the query log and then querying for things that happened, and you can then pretty easily either block or unblock specific DNS names. And if you combine that with, for example, the local Adguard in your browser, you have a great, truly great browsing experience. The internet will be fast again and you feel a lot more private than you did before. So, what do you make out of that? Is it worth the effort? Is it too complicated to set up Unbound and Adguard as a working team? Or do you like the idea? Let me know in the comments below. And while you are there, don't forget to like, to subscribe and to hit the notification bell, since it helps. Thanks for watching, see you next time, and don't forget, let's make the world a better place. Take care, see you later. Bye.